The space station hung in the darkness like a metal flower, its arms reaching out into the void. Ships came and went every hour, bringing traders and soldiers from across the galaxy. Today, something special arrived. A battle dragon, massive and terrible, limped through the docking bay doors. Its metal scales were cracked and burned. Smoke rose from its back where the wings connected to the body. Commander Hana stepped off the dragon's back with careful movements. Her uniform was torn in 3 places and blood stained her sleeve. But she held her head high. She was Velrian, one of the oldest and proudest races in the galaxy. Her people had conquered the stars when most other species were still living in caves. They had built empires and destroyed worlds. They feared nothing. The dragon behind her groaned, a deep sound that shook the metal floor. Its name was Crimson Shadow, and it had been with Hana for 15 years. They had fought in 20 battles together. The dragon was not just a machine. It was alive with real blood and real bones, but also with metal parts and computer systems built into its body. The Velrians had created these creatures centuries ago, mixing biology with technology in ways that made other species uncomfortable. Station workers rushed forward with equipment and scanning devices. They pointed at the dragon and talked in quick, worried voices. Hana ignored them. She walked straight to the station commander's office, her boots clicking on the floor. She needed the best mechanic available. Crimson Shadow was dying, and she knew it. The station commander was a short alien with 4 arms and gray skin. He looked at Hana with all 3 of his eyes and made a gesture that meant respect in his culture. "Commander Hana, we received your emergency call. We have contacted the nearest Velrian repair ship. They will arrive in 6 days. 6 days. Hana felt something cold move through her chest. Crimson Shadow did not have 6 days. She had seen the readouts during the flight here. The dragon's power core was failing. Its neural interface was damaged. Without immediate help, it would die in 3 days, maybe 4. "Who is your best mechanic?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. The station commander's eyes moved away from her face. He seemed uncomfortable. "We have several good mechanics, but the best one available right now is, well, there is a human." Hana stared at him. For a moment, she could not speak. Then she laughed. It was not a happy sound. "A human? You are joking." "I am not joking, Commander. His name is Taman. He has been working on this station for 2 years. He has fixed ships that other mechanics said were impossible to repair. He understands biomechanical systems better than anyone else here." Hana's face became hard. "Humans have been in space for barely 100 years. They are children playing with tools they do not understand. My dragon is worth more than their entire planet. I will not let some primitive mechanic touch Crimson Shadow." The station commander said nothing. He had heard these opinions before from other species. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had no great empire, no ancient history among the stars. Most older races looked down on them. But he had seen what Taman could do. He had seen miracles. "With respect, Commander, you may not have a choice. The next qualified Velrian mechanic is 6 days away. Your dragon does not have 6 days. Hana wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She had flown for 3 days to reach this station because it was the closest place with proper medical and repair facilities. There was nowhere else to go. Her pride fought against her fear, and for a long moment she stood silent. Finally, she spoke through tight lips. "Show me this human." They found Taman in Workshop 7, deep in the maintenance section of the station. The room was filled with tools and parts from 100 different worlds. A strange smell hung in the air, mixing oil and ozone with something organic. Taman was bent over a work table, welding something with intense focus. He did not look up when they entered. He was younger than Hana expected, maybe 30 years old in human terms. His black hair was pulled back from his face, and his hands were covered in old scars and fresh burns. He wore simple work clothes that had seen better days. Nothing about him suggested greatness. He looked like a common laborer. "Taman," the station commander called out. The human looked up and turned off his welding tool. His eyes moved from the commander to Hana, reading her rank and species in a single glance. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, nothing more. No bow, no special respect, just a simple nod. Hana felt anger rise in her chest. This was the great mechanic? This child who did not even know how to show proper respect to a commander. "This human will examine your dragon," the station commander said. "If anyone can help, it is him." Hana looked at Taman with cold eyes. "Tell me your qualifications, human." Where did you study? What certificates do you hold? How many Velrian biomechanical systems have you repaired? Taman wiped his hands on a cloth. His face showed nothing. No pride, no anger, no fear. I studied at the Human Technical Institute on Earth. I have no certificates that your people would recognize. I have never worked on a Velrian battle dragon before. The words fell like stones. Hana felt her worst fears confirmed. She turned to leave. This is a waste of time. My dragon will die before I let an unqualified human experiment on it. Your dragon is already dying, Taman said quietly. Hana stopped. She turned back slowly, her eyes dangerous. What did you say? I said your dragon is dying. I can see it from here. The way it breathes, the color of the smoke from its vents, the way it holds its left wing. The damage is not just physical. There's something wrong with its biomechanical integration. If you wait 6 days for a Velrian mechanic, you will be burying your dragon, not repairing it. Rage filled Hana's body. How dare this human speak to her this way? How dare he claim to understand Velrian technology just by looking? She stepped forward, her hand moving to the weapon at her side. You know nothing about my dragon. You know nothing about Velrian engineering. You are a primitive mechanic from a primitive world, and I will not stand here and listen to your assumptions. Taman did not step back. He met her eyes with steady calm. Then leave. But I have seen cascade failures before. Your dragon has maybe 3 days, probably less. The choice is yours, Commander. Your pride or your dragon's life. The room became very quiet. Even the station commander held his breath. Hana stood frozen, her hand on her weapon, her mind racing. She looked into the human's eyes and saw something that surprised her. Not arrogance, not pride, but simple certainty. He believed what he said. He truly believed he could save Crimson Shadow. And deep down, beneath her anger and her pride, Hana knew something else. She knew he was right about the timeline. She had been lying to herself, hoping the dragon could last until the Velrian mechanics arrived. But the truth was darker and more urgent. She slowly removed her hand from her weapon. If you touch my dragon and it dies, I will kill you myself. Taman nodded once. Understood. Let me see the diagnostic readouts. Hana pulled out her datapad and threw it at him. He caught it easily and began scrolling through the information. His eyes moved fast, reading numbers and charts that would take most mechanics hours to understand. After only 2 minutes, his expression changed. Something flickered across his face, recognition mixed with concern. This is worse than I thought, he said softly. Much worse. Taman walked around Crimson Shadow slowly, his eyes taking in every detail. The dragon lay on the repair platform, its massive body barely fitting in the space. Each breath came hard and rough. Its eyes, normally bright with intelligence, were dim and clouded with pain. Hana watched from behind a safety barrier, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. The human placed his hand on the dragon's side, just above where the metal scales met flesh. Crimson Shadow flinched but did not pull away. Taman spoke softly, words too quiet for Hana to hear. The dragon's eye swiveled to look at him, and something passed between them. A moment of understanding, perhaps, or maybe just the desperate hope of a dying creature. Behind Hana, a crowd was forming. Word had spread through the station that a human was going to work on a Velrian battle dragon. Such a thing had never happened before. Mechanics from other species came to watch. Traders stopped their business to see. Even the station's security chief arrived, standing at the back with his arms folded. Hana felt their eyes on her back. She felt their judgment. A Velrian commander trusting her precious battle dragon to a human. It was shameful. It was desperate. It was necessary. Taman pulled out a small scanning device, something Hana did not recognize. It looked crude compared to Velrian technology, built from mismatched parts and held together with what appeared to be simple wire. But when he ran it over the dragon's body, the readings on his datapad were detailed and precise. The main problem is infection, Taman said, his voice carrying across the workshop. Not a biological infection exactly, and not a computer virus exactly. Something in between. It is attacking the connection points where the organic tissue meets the mechanical systems. Hana pushed away from the barrier and walked closer. That is impossible. Velrian biomechanical interfaces are protected against all known infections. We have been building these systems for 500 years. Taman looked at her with patient eyes. All known Velrian infections, yes. But this is something new. Something your dragon picked up in whatever battle it was fighting. Look here. He pointed to a screen showing the dragon's internal systems. Red marks spread through the neural pathways like poison. The infection is making the organic parts reject the mechanical parts. The dragon's own body is fighting against itself. Hana stared at the screen. She had seen these readouts before during the flight, but she had not understood what they meant. The Velrian diagnostic systems had flagged them as minor integration issues. Nothing critical. But now seeing them through Taemin's explanation, the pattern became clear and terrifying. "How do you fix it?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Taemin was silent for a long moment. His fingers moved across his datapad, running calculations and checking numbers. Finally, he looked up. The Velrian solution would be to replace the infected systems. Remove the damaged neural interfaces, cut out the compromised mechanical components, and install new ones. It would save the dragon's life. "Then do it," Hana said quickly. "But," Taemin continued, "the dragon would not be the same. You would lose about 40% of its higher brain functions. It would still fly and fight, but it would not remember you. It would not have personality or intelligence. It would be a smart animal, nothing more. A tool." The words hit Hana like physical blows. Crimson Shadow was not just her battle companion. The dragon had saved her life 6 times. It had mourned with her when her brother died. It had celebrated with her after victories. The bond between a Velrian warrior and their battle dragon was sacred, deeper than most other species could understand. To reduce Crimson Shadow to a mindless tool would be worse than death. "Then what do you propose?" Hana asked, her voice shaking slightly. Taemin set down his scanner. "I want to try something different. Something that comes from human medicine, not engineering. Instead of replacing the infected systems, I want to cure the infection. Let the dragon's body heal naturally while I support it with specialized treatment and micro-repairs." Hana felt her anger rising again. "That is barbaric. You would treat a sophisticated biomechanical system like a sick animal?" "Yes," Taemin said simply, "because it is a sick animal. It is also a sophisticated machine, but first and most importantly, it is alive. Velrian engineering is incredible, Commander. Your people have done things with biomechanical integration that humans are only beginning to understand, but maybe you have forgotten something along the way." "And what is that?" Hana's voice was sharp. "That life finds a way to heal itself if you give it the chance. You do not always need to cut and replace. Sometimes you just need to remove the obstacles and let nature do its work." A voice came from the crowd behind them. "This is insanity." A Velrian mechanic stepped forward, his uniform marking him as a civilian contractor. "Commander Hana, you cannot seriously be considering this. This human wants to experiment on your dragon with primitive medical techniques. He will kill it." Other voices joined in, some agreeing, some curious. The crowd grew louder. Hana felt the weight of their opinions pressing down on her. She was a commander, used to making quick decisions in battle, but this was different. This was not about tactics or strategy. This was about trust. She looked at Taemin. "Explain your plan exactly." "Every step." Taemin nodded and pulled up a diagram on his datapad. "First, I synthesize antibodies that can target the infection. I use human medical databases as a starting point, then modify them for the dragon-specific biology. Second, I create micro-repair drones, very small robots that can enter the body and work alongside the natural healing process. They do not replace anything, they just support and guide the healing. Third, I monitor constantly, adjusting treatment as the dragon's body responds. The whole process will take about 3 days. 3 days of experimentation, the Velrian mechanic scoffed. 3 days of torture for that poor creature. Commander, if you allow this, I will report it to the Velrian High Command as animal cruelty and gross negligence. Hana's eyes flashed with rage. She turned on the mechanic. You dare threaten me? You are a civilian. I am a military commander. If you speak one more word, I will have you removed from this station. The mechanic's face went pale, but he stepped back and said nothing more. Hana turned back to Taemin. Her mind was racing. Everything in her training said to follow standard procedure. Wait for the Velrian mechanics. Use proven technology. Follow the rules. But her heart, the part of her that had bonded with Crimson Shadow all those years ago, was saying something different. She thought about the moment she had first met her dragon. It had been young then, barely trained. She had been young too, fresh from the military academy and full of pride. They had not liked each other at first. She thought the dragon was stubborn. The dragon thought she was arrogant. But over the years, through battles and quiet moments, they had learned to understand each other. They had become family. If I agree to this, Hana said slowly, what are the chances of success? Taman met her eyes. Honestly, I do not know. I have never done this exact procedure before, but I understand the principles and I believe it will work. If I had to guess, I would say 60% chance of full recovery, 20% chance of partial recovery, 20% chance of failure. And if we wait for the Velrian mechanics, 0% chance your dragon lives that long. The silence stretched out. Crimson Shadow groaned softly and Hana felt something break inside her chest. She had brought her dragon to this station hoping for a miracle. Now a human was offering her one and her pride was trying to refuse it. She thought about all the battles they had won together, all the enemies they had defeated, all the times Crimson Shadow had trusted her to make the right decision. Now it was her turn to show trust. Do it, she said finally. But I have conditions. Taman waited. You will sign a contract making you responsible for any harm. I will have guards watching you every moment. If I think you are failing, I will stop the procedure immediately. And if my dragon dies, I will hold you accountable. Agreed, Taman said without hesitation. Hana pulled out her datapad and quickly wrote a legal contract. It was harsh and one-sided, but Taman read it and signed without complaint. He seemed to understand that this was about more than just law. It was about a commander doing everything she could to protect herself from the guilt of making the wrong choice. Within the hour, Taman had set up his workspace. He brought in equipment that Hana had never seen before. Some of it looked advanced. Some of it looked like scrap held together with determination. He worked with quick efficiency, connecting scanners and monitors to Crimson Shadow's body. The dragon watched him with wary eyes but did not resist. Hana stationed 4 guards around the workshop, all of them armed and alert. She gave them strict orders. Watch everything. Record everything. If the human does anything suspicious, stop him immediately. The guards nodded and took their positions, their weapons ready. Taman ignored them completely. He was already lost in his work, his hands moving with surprising gentleness across the dragon's damaged scales. He spoke to Crimson Shadow constantly, his voice low and calm. Hana could not hear the words, but the dragon seemed to respond, its breathing becoming slightly easier. Beginning Phase 1, Taman announced. Synthesis of treatment compounds. But humans seemed to operate on a more immediate moral compass, asking not, what does protocol demand? But rather, what is the right thing to 2 weeks had passed since Crimson Shadow's recovery. The dragon now moved through the station's flight bay with fluid grace, wings spreading wide to test their strength. Every system functioned at peak efficiency. The scars from battle remained on the dragon's scales, but they were honorable marks now. Proof of survival rather than symbols of defeat. Hana stood watching from the observation deck, a datapad in her hands filled with notes from her sessions with Taman. Over the past 14 days, she had spent several hours each day in his workshop, learning the principles behind his approach to biomechanical engineering. It had been humbling and illuminating in equal measure. The first lesson had been the hardest to accept. Taman had shown her how Velrian diagnostic tools were designed to find problems but not always to understand causes. They identified failures and suggested replacements, following decision trees that were centuries old. But they rarely asked the deeper question. Why did this failure happen? What conditions allowed it to occur? Your people are excellent at building systems, Taman had explained. But sometimes I think you trust your technology so much that you forget to question it. When something breaks, you replace it according to protocol. But what if the protocol itself is flawed? Hana had wanted to argue at first. Velrian protocols were tested and refined over centuries. They represented the accumulated wisdom of the greatest engineers in the galaxy. But she forced herself to listen, to consider the possibility that wisdom could become rigid over time, that the best solutions of the past might not serve the present equally well. The second lesson had been about observation. Taman spent far more time watching systems operate than most Velrian mechanics would consider efficient. He studied patterns, noticed small irregularities, and asked questions about behaviors that seemed normal. When Hana asked why he wasted so much time on observation, he had smiled and said, I am not wasting time. I am learning the language of the system. Every machine speaks to you if you know how to listen. This philosophy extended to how he treated Crimson Shadow. He did not just see the dragon as a collection of components to be maintained. He saw it as a whole being, with preferences and reactions and even moods that affected its physical performance. When he made adjustments, he considered not just technical specifications but also how the dragon would experience those changes. Comfort matters, he had told her. A dragon that feels good in its body will perform better than one that is technically perfect but uncomfortable. The mind and body are connected. You cannot optimize one without considering the other. These ideas challenged fundamental assumptions in Velrian engineering culture. But as Hana learned more, she began to see their value. She started noticing things she had missed before. The way Crimson Shadow favored its left side slightly when tired. The subtle variations in wing speed that indicated emotional state. The patterns of behavior that preceded equipment stress. During the second week, other Velrians began arriving at the station, drawn by reports of what had happened. Some came as critics determined to prove that Taemon's success was luck rather than skill. They examined Crimson Shadow carefully, ran their own diagnostics, and looked for flaws in the human's work. They found none. The dragon was remarkably healthy, with system integration values that exceeded standard specifications. One senior engineer, a woman named Hyejin, who had worked with battle dragons for 40 years, spent an entire day examining Crimson Shadow. She said little during the inspection, her face neutral and professional. But at the end, she sought out Taemon in his workshop. "I came here to prove you were a fraud," Hyejin said bluntly. "I wanted to show that your success was temporary, that you had used shortcuts that would fail later, but I cannot find any flaws in your work."
In fact, that dragon is healthier than most of the ones I service regularly.
"How did you do it?" Taemon had invited her to stay and observe his techniques. Hyejin accepted, becoming the first Velrian engineer to formally study human biomechanical approaches. She was difficult and skeptical, questioning everything but also genuinely curious. Over several days, Taemon taught her the same principles he had taught Hana, and slowly, Hyejin's skepticism transformed into fascination. "We have been doing this wrong for a long time," Hyejin admitted to Hana during one of their meetings. "Not completely wrong, but wrong in subtle ways that accumulate into larger problems. We focused so much on technological advancement that we forgot we were working with living beings. The humans remember that because they have no choice. Their technology is younger, less refined, so they have to work with nature rather than trying to dominate it completely. There is wisdom in their approach." This admission from a respected Velrian engineer carried weight. Word spread quickly through the professional community. What had begun as a controversial story about one human mechanic was becoming something larger, a re-evaluation of fundamental engineering principles. The political implications grew more complex. Some Velrian leaders embraced the opportunity to learn from humans, seeing it as a sign of strength and adaptability. Others saw it as shameful, proof that Velrian superiority was declining. Debates raged in government halls and public forums. Should they establish formal cooperation with human institutions? Should they send students to study on Earth? Should they invite human engineers to work on Velrian projects? Hana found herself at the center of these debates. She was asked to submit reports, give testimony, and explain her decisions. Some criticized her harshly for trusting a human over Velrian experts. Others praised her for being open-minded enough to recognize talent regardless of species. She handled both praise and criticism with equal composure, focusing on facts rather than emotions. "I did what was necessary to save my dragon," she told one inquiry board. "If that decision embarrasses some people, then perhaps they should ask themselves why they value pride over life. I'm a soldier. My job is to protect and serve, not to maintain comfortable illusions about superiority." Her words were recorded and spread across multiple worlds. Many young Velrians found inspiration in her stance, seeing it as a model for how their species should engage with the galaxy's newer members. The older generation was more divided, some admiring her courage while others saw her as representing unwelcome change. Meanwhile, Taemon continued his work, largely ignoring the attention. He fixed ships, solved problems, and taught anyone willing to learn. His workshop became a gathering place for engineers from various species, all curious about human methods. Jiho helped coordinate these informal classes, enjoying his role as both student and teaching assistant. On the 15th day, Hana prepared to leave the station. Crimson Shadow was fully recovered and cleared for active duty. Her military unit needed her back, but she found herself reluctant to go, not because she doubted her dragon's health, but because she knew something important was happening here, and she wanted to be part of it. Before departing, she met with Taman one final time in his workshop. She brought with her a package sealed with official Velrian military insignia. "This is for you," she said, handing him the package. "It is a commendation from the Velrian High Command, acknowledging your service and skill. You are the first human to receive this honor." Taman opened the package carefully. Inside was a crystalline metal, its surface etched with symbols representing excellence in biomechanical engineering. It was beautiful and clearly valuable both monetarily and symbolically. "I do not know what to say," Taman said quietly. "This is more than I expected." "It is less than you deserve," Hana replied. "You saved my dragon and taught me humility. Both lessons were necessary, though the second was harder to learn than the first." She paused, then continued with visible emotion. "When I arrived here, I saw you as beneath me. I saw humans as primitives who had stumbled into space through luck and persistence. I was arrogant and blind. You showed me that wisdom is not measured in centuries or technological achievement. It is measured in understanding, adaptability, and the courage to try new approaches when old ones fail." Taman set down the metal carefully. "You were not wrong about everything, Commander. Humans are new to space. We do not have your experience or your advanced technology, but maybe that is actually an advantage sometimes. We have not learned all the rules yet, so we do not know which ones we should break. We still question everything because we cannot afford to assume we have all the answers. That is exactly why the galaxy needs human influence," Hana said. "The older species have become comfortable, perhaps too comfortable. We follow traditions without questioning them. We rely on ancient wisdom without testing if it still applies to new situations. You push us to reconsider, to adapt, to remember that there is always more to learn." She extended her hand in the human gesture of respect and farewell. Taman shook it firmly. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "Definitely. I have submitted a proposal to the Velrian Military Command suggesting an exchange program. I want Velrian engineers to study with humans, and human engineers to work on Velrian projects. If the proposal is accepted, I will personally oversee the program. You would be my first choice as a human representative." The third day brought unexpected challenges. Taman had finally agreed to rest, sleeping for 4 hours in a small room adjacent to the workshop, while Jiho monitored Crimson Shadow. When he woke, he looked slightly more human, though his eyes still carried the weight of exhaustion. He ate quickly, barely tasting the food, and returned to his station. Hana had not left the observation area. She had brought a portable workstation and was handling her military duties from the window, keeping Crimson Shadow in sight at all times. Reports from her unit needed attention. Supply requests waited for approval, but she found it difficult to focus on normal tasks. Her mind kept returning to the dragon and the human who had saved it. Throughout the morning, Taman ran detailed scans of every system in Crimson Shadow's body. He moved with methodical care, checking and rechecking each reading. The infection was almost gone now, reduced to barely 10% of its original spread. The mechanical and organic systems were beginning to work together again as they were designed to. But something was bothering him. Hana could see it in the way his brow furrowed, the way he kept returning to the same set of readings. Finally, he called out to Jiho. "Look at this neural interface connection. See how the signal strength drops every few minutes?" Jiho studied the monitor carefully. "I see it. But the infection is mostly cleared from that area. Why would the signal be unstable?" Taman rubbed his eyes. "Because we solved the immediate problem, but we did not fix the underlying vulnerability. Something about this dragon's biomechanical integration is not optimal. That is probably why it got infected in the first place." Hana entered the workshop, unable to stay away any longer. "What are you saying? Is there another problem?" Taman turned to face her. "Not a problem exactly. More like a design flaw. Your dragon systems work, but they are not perfectly balanced. The connection between the organic brain and the mechanical enhancements creates small stress points. Over time, these stress points made Crimson Shadow vulnerable to infection. If we do not address this, the dragon might get sick again in the future." Hana felt cold fear return. "Can you fix it?" "Yes, but it requires optimization work. Delicate adjustments to how the neural interface communicates with the organic tissue. It is not dangerous, but it is complex and time-consuming." "How long?" Another full day of work, maybe more. Hana glanced at the monitors showing Crimson Shadow's improved condition. The dragon was stable now, out of immediate danger. She could stop the procedure here and transport her dragon to a proper Velrian facility for any remaining work. That would be the safe choice, the proper choice, but she found herself unwilling to make that decision. "Continue," she said. "Do whatever is necessary to make my dragon fully healthy." Taman nodded and returned to his work. He began the optimization process, making tiny adjustments to the neural interface settings. Each change was carefully calculated and tested before implementation. He explained his work to Jiho as he went, turning the procedure into a teaching moment. The younger human listened intently, asking questions and offering suggestions. Hana watched this partnership with interest. Human cooperation was different from Velrian teamwork. Velrians worked in strict hierarchies with clear chains of command. Every person had their role and stayed within it. But Taman and Jiho seemed to operate more fluidly. Jiho was clearly the junior partner, but Taman welcomed his input and ideas. They debated approaches, sometimes disagreeing, but always with respect. It was chaotic compared to Velrian efficiency, but it also seemed to generate creative solutions. By midday, word of Taman's success had spread far beyond the station. Ships arriving from other systems brought news that the story was being discussed on multiple worlds. A human mechanic had saved a Velrian battle dragon using unconventional methods. Some species saw it as an inspiring tale of cooperation. Others saw it as embarrassing proof that the Velrians were losing their edge. A few saw it as a dangerous precedent, humans gaining influence they had not earned. The station's communication system received dozens of requests for interviews. News organizations wanted to speak with Taman. Medical researchers wanted to study his techniques. Engineering firms wanted to hire him. He ignored all of it, focused entirely on his work. But Hana could not ignore the political implications. She was a military commander, trained to think strategically. This situation was bigger than just one dragon now. It was becoming a symbol, a story that would be told across the galaxy. How she handled it would matter. She sent messages to several key people in the Velrian government. She told them what had happened, emphasizing both Taman's skill and the lessons learned. She argued that Velrians should study human approaches to biomechanical engineering, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. A strong species learned from everyone, even those they had previously dismissed. The responses came back slowly. Some officials agreed with her assessment. Others were furious that she had trusted a human with such important work. A few accused her of betraying Velrian pride. The reactions were mixed, as she had expected. Change was never easy, especially for a species as old and proud as hers. In the workshop, Taman encountered a complication. As he optimized the neural interface, he discovered that some of Crimson Shadow's mechanical components were not original Velrian design. At some point, probably during battlefield repairs, someone had installed replacement parts that were slightly incompatible with the rest of the system. These parts worked well enough to pass inspection, but they created subtle inefficiencies. "This explains a lot," Taman said, showing the scans to Hana. "These components here and here are aftermarket parts, probably from a different manufacturer. They function, but they do not integrate perfectly with the original design. It is like speaking two slightly different languages. You can communicate, but there is always a small delay in translation." Hana felt anger rise. "I was told those repairs were done to proper standards. Someone lied to me. Maybe, or maybe they just did not know. These incompatibilities are subtle. They would not show up in standard diagnostics, but they add up over time, creating stress on the system. Can you fix it?" Taman considered. "I can compensate for it through careful optimization. I can make the different components work together more smoothly. But for a perfect solution, you would need to replace those parts with proper Velrian originals. Do what you can now. I will deal with the replacements later." Taman worked through the afternoon and into the evening, his hands steady despite fatigue. He adjusted settings, fine-tuned responses, and tested each change thoroughly. Slowly, the neural interface became more efficient. The signal strength stabilized. The stress points diminished. He was not just healing the dragon anymore. He was making it better than it had been before the injury. Crimson Shadow seemed to sense the improvements. The dragon became more alert, more responsive. When Hana entered the workshop to stand near the platform, The dragon's head turned toward her immediately. Its eyes were clear and intelligent, recognizing her not just as an owner but as a beloved companion. A low rumble came from its throat, a sound of affection that Velrian battle dragons rarely made except with those they trusted completely. Hana felt tears threaten to form. She pushed them back, maintaining her composure, but her hand reached out to touch Crimson Shadow's snout. The dragon leaned into her touch, closing its eyes briefly. They had both survived something terrible, and their bond was stronger for it. "Your dragon really loves you," Taman observed quietly. He was standing a respectful distance away, giving them privacy in the moment. "I have worked on many biomechanical beings, but I have never seen a connection quite like this." Hana did not look away from Crimson Shadow. Battle dragons bond deeply with their chosen riders. It is part of their nature engineered into them centuries ago. But the bond goes both ways. Crimson Shadow is not just my tool or weapon. This dragon is my family. "That makes sense," Taman said. "I could see it in how you fought with me at first. You were not just protecting an expensive piece of equipment. You were protecting someone you love." The simple understanding in his words touched something in Hana's chest. For 3 days, she had been surrounded by people who saw this situation as a technical problem or a political issue, but Taman saw it for what it truly was. A story about love and trust and the desperate lengths someone would go to save family. "Why did you agree to help?" Hana asked suddenly. "You knew I doubted you. You knew I would blame you if anything went wrong. You could have refused and no one would have criticized you. So why did you take the risk?" Taman was quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts. "Because I could help. Because the dragon needed me. It would have been wrong to let it die just because you hurt my feelings or because the job was difficult. I became a mechanic to fix things, to solve problems. This was a problem I could solve, so I had to try." The simplicity of his answer was profound. There was no talk of glory or reward. No thought of political advantage. Just the basic conviction that someone with the ability to help had a responsibility to do so. It was a very human philosophy, Hana realized. Other species often made decisions based on hierarchy, tradition, or strategic benefit. He moved to a machine that looked like it was built from 3 different technologies. His fingers danced. The second day began with chaos. Crimson Shadow's temperature spiked during the early morning hours, triggering every alarm in the workshop. Hana had been dozing in a chair near the observation window, but she jumped to her feet the moment the noise started. Through the glass, she could see Taman already moving, his hands flying across the controls even though he looked like he had not slept at all. "Temperature rising too fast," Jiho called out, reading the monitors. "The mechanical systems are overheating. The cooling gel is not working." Taman did not panic. He ran to a storage cabinet and pulled out containers filled with a blue liquid that seemed to glow in the workshop lights. "Help me with this," he told Jiho. Together they poured the liquid into injection ports along the dragon's spine. The substance flowed through tubes and spread into Crimson Shadow's mechanical systems. Within minutes, the temperature began to drop. The alarms quieted. The dragon's breathing, which had become rapid and shallow, returned to normal. Hana pressed her hand against the observation window, her heart still racing. She had almost lost Crimson Shadow right there. If Taman had been even a few minutes slower, if he had not known exactly what to do, her dragon would be dead. One of the guards leaned close to Hana. "Commander, perhaps we should stop this. The human is experimenting. He does not truly know what he is doing." Hana considered the words. Part of her agreed. This was madness. Every crisis seemed to prove that Taman was out of his depth, making things up as he went along. But another part of her, the part that had spent years learning to read battles and predict outcomes, saw something different. She saw a mechanic who understood the flow of the dragon's condition. Yes, he was improvising, but his improvisations worked. There was genius hidden in his chaos. "We continue," she said firmly, "but stay alert." Inside the workshop, Taman returned to his monitoring station. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they remained focused. He pulled up new scans of the dragon's internal systems and studied them carefully. What he saw made him smile slightly, the first expression of satisfaction Hana had seen on his face. "The infection is retreating," he said to Jiho. "Look at these neural pathways. Yesterday they were 70% compromised. Now it is down to 50%. The treatment is working." Jiho leaned over to check the readings. The younger human's face showed relief and excitement. Should we increase the dosage? Push harder while we have momentum. Taman shook his head. No, if we push too hard, we might damage the healthy tissue. We have to let the dragon's own healing process do most of the work. We are just guides, not replacements. He stood up and walked back to Crimson Shadow. The dragon's eye followed him, showing more awareness than before. Taman placed his hand gently on the dragon's head. You are doing good. Keep fighting. Hana watched this interaction with mixed feelings. Part of her was grateful that Taman treated Crimson Shadow with such care and respect. But part of her was also uncomfortable. In Velrian culture, battle dragons were partners and tools, valuable and honored but still fundamentally property. The way Taman spoke to Crimson Shadow was different. He spoke to the dragon like an equal, like a person who deserved dignity and encouragement. It was strange. It was almost offensive, and yet, the dragon responded to it in ways that made Hana wonder if her people had been missing something important. The morning turned to afternoon. Spectators continued to gather outside the workshop, their numbers growing every hour. The station commander had to assign extra security just to keep the corridors clear. Representatives from 3 different species requested permission to observe the procedure more closely. Hana denied them all. This was not a show. This was her dragon's life, but she could not stop the rumors from spreading. The station's communication systems buzzed with messages. Some people called Taman a miracle worker. Others called him a reckless fool. The Velrian civilians on the station were particularly divided. Some felt shame that their own mechanics could not help, while a human could. Others insisted that Taman would fail eventually, and then everyone would see that humans were not as clever as they pretended to be. In the workshop, Taman began Phase 2 of his treatment. He activated the micro-repair drones, tiny machines so small they could barely be seen with the naked eye. These drones would enter Crimson Shadow's body through injection points and travel through the bloodstream to the sites of worst damage. Once there, they would not cut or replace anything. Instead, they would provide scaffolding for the dragon's own cells to use during healing. They would clear away dead tissue and deliver concentrated nutrients. They would be temporary helpers, eventually dissolving once their work was complete. This technology was human in origin, developed for medical purposes back on Earth. Humans had needed it because their bodies were fragile compared to many other species, and traditional surgery was often too risky, so human doctors had learned to work with the body instead of against it, developing tools that supported natural healing rather than forcing artificial solutions. Injecting drones now, Taman announced. He pressed a button, and thousands of tiny machines flowed into the dragon's body. On the monitors, they appeared as small bright dots moving through the bloodstream. Hana watched them spread throughout Crimson Shadow's system, clustering around the damaged areas like helpful insects. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dragon's entire body tensed. Its eyes went wide. A low sound rumbled from its throat, something between pain and confusion. The monitors showed the dragon's heart rate spiking. Its muscles contracted. It is rejecting the drones, one of the guards shouted. Stop the procedure. But Taman held up his hand. Wait, this is normal. The dragon's immune system is responding to the foreign objects. Give it a moment. He spoke directly to Crimson Shadow, his voice calm and steady. I know it feels strange. I know you want to fight it. But these little machines are friends. They are here to help. Trust me. Hana held her breath. The dragon's distress was clear and terrible. Every instinct told her to order Taman to stop, to remove the drones before they caused more harm. Her hand moved to her communicator, ready to give the command, but something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the confidence in Taman's voice. Maybe it was the desperate knowledge that there were no other options. Or maybe it was something she saw in Crimson Shadow's eyes, a flicker of understanding, a choice to trust. Slowly, impossibly, the dragon began to relax. Its heart rate came down. Its muscles unclenched. The immune response lessened. On the monitors, the drones continued their work, no longer being attacked by the dragon's defenses. The crisis passed. Hana released the breath she had been holding. Her legs felt weak. She sat down heavily in her chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. She had not truly rested since the battle that injured Crimson Shadow. Fear and duty had kept her alert, but now the accumulated stress was catching up to her. Commander, you should rest, one of the guards said quietly. We will watch and wake you if anything changes. Hana wanted to refuse. A Velrian commander did not show weakness. A Velrian commander did not abandon their post. But her body was betraying her, demanding rest. And some small voice in her mind whispered that Taman had earned a measure of trust. He had kept Crimson Shadow alive through 2 major crises. He clearly knew what he was doing, even if his methods were strange and frightening. "Wake me immediately if there are any problems," she ordered. Then she closed her eyes and let herself drift into uneasy sleep. She dreamed of battles and dragons, of fire and blood in the darkness of space. She dreamed of her brother who had died 3 years ago in a Velrian war. She dreamed of the day she first bonded with Crimson Shadow, both of them young and uncertain. The dreams mixed together into a confusion of images and emotions. When she woke, it was deep into the night cycle. The workshop was quieter now, most of the spectators gone. Only a few dedicated watchers remained, their faces pressed to the observation windows. Hana stood and looked into the workshop. Taman was still there, still working. He had been at this for nearly 36 hours without break, but something was different. Crimson Shadow looked better. The dragon's breathing was easier, more natural. Its eyes were brighter, tracking Taman's movements with clear awareness. The smoke that had been rising from its vents was gone. The monitor showed vital signs that were not perfect, but were significantly improved from yesterday. Hana's heart lifted. This was working. Against all logic, against all expectation, Taman's mad experiment was actually working. She entered the workshop, ignoring the protests of her guards. Taman looked up as she approached. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his eyes remained alert. "Commander," he said with a small nod, "how is Crimson Shadow?" Hana asked. "Better. Much better. The infection is down to 30%. The mechanical systems are integrating more smoothly with the organic tissue. The crisis point has passed. Your dragon will live." Hana felt emotion surge through her, relief so strong it almost brought tears. She had not realized how much fear she had been carrying. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be. We still have work to do. The healing process will continue for several more days. But the worst danger is behind us, Hana.